This week on the Wire to Wire podcast, football is back and is in full swing. Week 2 matchups are looking good. I give you my top 5 picks and how I see those games unfolding. Also, Eastern and Western Conference Finals are in full swing. The West looks to be dominated by the Lakers, and the Heat have a commanding 2-0 lead. Also, Tyron Woodley versus Kobe Covington this week. All this and more next on the Wire to Wire podcast. Welcome back to the Wire Wire podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Smethers. Today we got a lot to get into, so without further ado, let's hop into some football. After week 1, I was 4-5 in my 5-game picks. The only game I got wrong was the Eagles. I had them beating the Washington football team, and that did not happen thanks to 2 picks by Carson Wentz and an offensive line that just wasn't there. Combine that with some good coaching from Ron Rivera and some very good young defensive linemen from Washington. It's just a bad mix. Going up 17-0 at halftime, though, if you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, you really have to look at this game and going, where the heck is the rest of our season going? Because that hurts. Early on, they were able to get the ball to Dallas Goedert and really make a difference, but Carson Wentz still struggles to find some wide receivers that can make plays for him. I think the Eagles have wide receivers that just struggle to make any sort of space on their route running, and it's just a recipe for disaster. But thanks for blowing up my parlay, man. I really appreciate it, Carson. So 4 of 5 though, 80%, pretty good. The average for a gambler, a sports gambler, is about 67, 68%. So I'm 80% against the spread, which is pretty good. I'm hoping to keep that number around 75 for this year. That being said, this week I'm going to give you 5 more. I'm going to give you 5 every week. So let's go into my 5. All right, we're going to start off with the Steelers over Broncos. I'm definitely taking the Steelers here. They're favored by 7.5. The Steelers the Steelers defense is absolutely elite. They are no joke. The pass rush is led by T.J. Watt. Those guys are a bunch of savages going for sacks, just looking to wreak havoc in the backfield, and they do a pretty damn good job of it. Then you go to the secondary, and that's really not a weak spot either because they're led by Minkah Fitzpatrick, and he is a difference maker. He's a ball hawk. He really changes that whole defense around in the secondary at least, and they are just really good from top to bottom on defense. Offensively, though, I'm not as high on them as everybody else is. I'm really not. When they, going back when they played the Giants, that defense is not good. It was one of the worst defenses in the league last year. They didn't do anything to really get that much better. And yes, Big Ben made some throws, but I just think he looked like an average to good quarterback. He didn't make any mistakes. Obviously you could tell they weren't. They were kind of worried about his arm strength and if it's there or not. If you watch the game, his fastball is not there, and I just think after Tommy John at his age, I don't know if you get your fastball back. When you're younger, you definitely regain that arm strength. It's been proven in baseball over and over again. This is a weird injury to have in football. It's a different throwing motion in football, and I don't know if he's going to be able to get that fastball back, but he's a good quarterback still. And if he can just give them better, ability at that position than they had last year, they can make some noise in the playoffs this year. This team is very good. On the other side of the ball, on the Broncos side, they really struggled offensively against the Titans. Now, I know Jerry Jeudy had some really big drops. If he can fix that, maybe this would be different. But they really struggled on offense. They didn't really put up that many points against the Tennessee Titans defense that is not as good as the Steelers defense. Defensively, I really liked how they stopped the run. I was kind of surprised at how they were able to contain Derrick Henry as well as they did. They did a really great job. Melvin Gordon, I guess, looked pretty good, but you're going up against a defense that just held Saquon Barkley to 6 yards. So I just think this is going to be an absolute ass whooping. I think the Steelers are going to take this one pretty handily by at least 2 touchdowns. I got the Steelers for my first game. My second game, I got to go with the 49ers over the Jets. Favored by 7. The Niners defense is coming out to prove a point. They didn't get lit up by Arizona. I don't know why everyone's making it sound like Kyler Murray just went out there and just lit it up through the air. I mean, they didn't get lit up. I think it was like 24, right? But we thought they were going to definitely look better. The thing is yes, Kyler Murray made that front 4 not look as devastating as they were last year, but Kyler Murray is a lot more mobile than Sam Darnold. He's a very elusive in the pocket, and he's always kind of given the Niners some trouble. So I wasn't surprised to see the Arizona Cardinals win that game. But Sam Darnold is gonna have nightmares coming up to this game, and they're just gonna come true on Sunday because Sam Darnold and the Jets looked absolutely terrible against Buffalo last week. It was not good. Sam Darnold looks to be regressing. He's still making terrible throws. That pick he threw on the throw across the field off his back foot, it just made you scratch your head, going, "What are you looking at? That was a good idea to throw the ball." You combine that with the fact that he's now lost Le'Veon Bell, who hits the IR this week. They've got zero offensive help for this guy. The offensive line's terrible. That front four from the 49ers is just going to absolutely dismantle the Jets, and it's going to be a blowout. But Vegas says 7. I think it's going to be more than that. I got the Niners winning big. The second game I'm going to pick, the Vikings are actually the underdogs to the Colts by 3 points. Now, when you look at it, both of them are 0-1. I get that. The Vikings took took a loss to the Packers in a what turned out to be a semi-competitive game late in the game because the Vikings offense kind of figured it out and were able to score some points late in the game, make it close. Then you go over to the Colts, and they were leading pretty much the whole game, but it was against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Gardner Minshew kind of carved that defense up. I'm going to say that again. Gardner Minshew, Mr. Florida Man, carved up the Colts defense. I think Kirk Cousins is going to have an absolute field day against that Colts defense, and you accompany that with the fact that Phillip Rivers still likes to throw picks. I don't care what uniform he's wearing. It's going to be a bad day for the Colts. They lost their number one running back, and the run game is going to suffer for that, and I just think they're going to have a lot of trouble against this Vikings team all around, and the Vikings are going to win by at least 2 touchdowns. They're the underdogs by 3 points, so they're going to at least win the game. I got the Vikings as my lock of the week. Next game I'm going to take the Ravens, getting another win. The Ravens are going to go up against the Houston Texans, and talk about a tough schedule to start the year. To kind of when you're trying to figure out your team, you got to go to Kansas City, and now you got to play the Ravens. Are you freaking kidding me, man? That's just a bad schedule. Texans are really unlucky here because the Ravens are out to prove a point. You saw last week against the Cleveland Browns. They really took that loss in the playoffs to the Tennessee Titans real tough. They're out to prove a point. They're out to, Lamar's out there. He wants to prove he can win the playoffs. He's now 0-2. He wants to prove that this MVP season that he had last year was no fluke, and they just lit up the Browns. They look really good offensively. They look really good defensively. So I really think they're going to go and be able to contain Deshaun Watson. But the way you beat the Ravens is the same way you beat the Chiefs, hypothetically, and that is by running the ball down their throats, controlling the time of possession, keeping Patrick Mahomes, or keeping Lamar Jackson, I should say, off of the field as much as possible, because when Lamar is on the field, he scores points. So I don't think the Houston Texans are going to be able to do that, and the Ravens are just going to destroy them. They're favored by 8.5, I think it's 8. I think that's a little low, actually. I think the Ravens are going to win by at least 2 touchdowns here. I really like the Ravens in this game. Lamar's just they're just a better team. That offensive line for Houston is a tire fire. They don't have much of a running game because of the offensive line. David Johnson's a great running back, but he's a lot of pass catch out of the backfield right now. Will Fuller's good, but they don't have that guy, which they lost in Hopkins on the third down, to be the great route runner to catch everything that's thrown his way. Will Fuller had a couple bad drops last week. His route running has improved, but it's not on the level of DeAndre Hopkins. So I think they're going to struggle against the Ravens, and the Ravens win this game pretty big. Last pick I got, I'm going to probably pick this team every day of the year, or every week of the year, is the Chiefs. The Chiefs are going. They're favored by 8.5, which they were favored by 9 against the Houston Texans. They're favored by 8.5 against the Chargers. Do the Chargers have a better defense than the Houston Texans? Yes. Do they have a better offense? Absolutely not. Tyrod Taylor is not a starting quarterback in this league. He's a good backup. He's a good professional quarterback. He's not a starter in this league. He just does not. I mean, they were only able to put up a few points against the Cincinnati Bengals, who just let up 35 to the Cleveland Browns. So I don't think this offense is good, and when you're not a good offense, you've got to be able to stop Patrick Mahomes. It's just not going to work. I think they're going to get crushed. Chiefs by at least 2 touchdowns, maybe 3. I think the Chiefs just have a field day and continue to march on to try to repeat as Super Bowl champions, which they have a pretty good chance of doing because that offense is dynamic. They can run you out of the building. They can beat you over the top. They can beat you just dinking and dunking if they wanted to. They can beat you any day or any way they feel fit for that week. And defensively, when you're playing ahead and you can pin your ears back, the defense, I don't care who's playing defense, the defense plays better. So they're going to play really well, I think, this week against a very crappy Chargers offense. So let's rehash that a little bit. I got the Steelers over the Broncos, Niners over the Jets, Vikings over the Colts, Ravens over the Texans, and Chiefs over the Chargers. Those are my 5 picks. Lock them in. I've got that on Sunday. I think that's going to be a really good one. All right, let's get into some basketball. Now, basketball is getting down to the wire. We are in the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, and little bit of a surprise here. Game 1 was super competitive against the Heat and Celtics going into overtime, and it was super competitive. Then you go to the second game, and the Celtics are up by 13 because the Celtics lost the first game. They're up by 13, though, in the second game. They blow a 13-point lead at halftime. They allow 20. They get outscored by 20 points in the third quarter. They don't look good in the second half. They end up getting beat pretty handedly by the Miami Heat. Jimmy Butler looks great. Duncan Robinson looks great for them, like a really good number 2 scorer. And it just seems like the Heat have control of the series. Now, the story coming out of this week, though, or at least today, was the fact that I guess in the locker room, that's right, the players' locker room, I'm going to say it again, the players' locker room, after blowing a 13-point lead, going down 2-0 in the Eastern Conference Finals, there were some players that were yelling at each other, using profanity. They were just angry, pissed off, and mad. And my thought is, I should say the media's thought is, oh my gosh, they're falling apart at the seams. My thought is how the hell would you like them to react? Do you want them to all be laughing, coking and joking, hanging out, just in good moods after blowing a 13-point lead, after going 2 down in the Eastern Conference Finals? Do you want them happy? Because that would show me that they don't care. At least here, it shows me that they're still engaged in this game. They're still engaged in this series. I know it's been a mental war in that bubble because they're away from their families for most of it. But how would you want them to react? And the other thing is, why do you care what happens in the players' locker room? That is their area. That is where they go to unwind after a game. That's where they go to get ready before a game. That's where they go to be that's where they go to get locked in as a team and as an individual. Why do you care what they do in that locker room? The reporters, the media needs to stay out of the locker room. That is their area, in my opinion. And I really don't care if they're yelling at each other. I actually prefer if they're yelling at each other after blowing that game. But the Celtics got together. Brad Stevens got the top 4 players together to talk it out, to hash it out, to air their dirty laundry, to basically just say what they're pissed off about, and maybe that'll fix things. But I really don't know why this is such a story. I think the bigger story is the fact that Jimmy Butler's leading the Heat to a 2-0 lead. Eric Spoelstra, who admittedly I thought was not that good of a coach in the time that they had the big 3, has proven to be a phenomenal coach in this league. Jimmy Butler fits him perfectly. They really mesh together. This team is playing very good basketball at a very good time. They got hot at the right time, and they really, they really just haven't had much competition at all. They handled the Milwaukee Bucks, and they're handling the Celtics at this point. Jimmy Butler's an absolute killer, and like I said, Duncan Robinson seems to be like the good number 2 guy, scoring option to go to on this team. But defensively, they just look like too much for the Celtics at this point. I do think the Celtics come back and make this a series somewhat. I can see this going 4-2, Heat winning in 6, but I can't see the Celtics coming back from this. That was a really demoralizing loss, and I think it's going to affect them in Game 3. I think the Heat take Game 3, the Celtics bounce back, win a couple, and then the Heat take it in Game 6 to move on to the finals. Now, the Western Conference Finals, kind of a whole different story. You have the Nuggets coming off an absolute fantastic win, beating the Clippers after being down 3-1, coming back from three double-digit leads and winning the series and doing a phenomenal thing. And then you go in and you meet the, I mean, what I mean, the best team in LA for sure, the Lakers, who are well rested, who've only played 10 games, two gentlemen sweeps in the playoffs, and they were well rested and they were waiting for your ass. And they came in, and after the first quarter, where the Nuggets put up a fight and actually left the first quarter with the lead, the Lakers put it on them. And what I saw was a team in the Nuggets that was just tired. They just don't have enough left in the tank to put up a real fight against this absolute beast duo in LeBron and Anthony Davis, who had great nights. Anthony Davis really took it to Jokic and really stepped up. And LeBron obviously stepped up. There's nobody for the Nuggets to guard LeBron. LeBron had a huge game. But what I also saw was the fact that the Lakers are getting really valuable production out of their role players. Dwight Howard had a couple blocks. Rondo, obviously, playoff Rondo's playing really well right now. Caldwell Pope's playing real well. It's just they're meshing together at the right time. They're getting hot at the right time, and I think they're just going to probably get another gentleman sweep for the Nuggets because LeBron always likes to take one game off. So I think they're going to get a nice gentleman sweep, go into the finals, and it's going to be a great matchup against the Heat and the Lakers. As that gets closer, as that comes to fruition, I will break it down. But that's the way I see it. NBA playoffs have been great. It's really been fun to watch Jimmy Butler's. I've really enjoyed watching the Nuggets. And the Lakers are the Lakers. LeBron's LeBron, and he's pissed off because he just lost the MVP by a landslide. And that was something we didn't expect. We all thought it was going to be a little closer than that. So you got pissed off LeBron in the playoffs for the perfect time to really push for that NBA title. That's a big deal. Okay, so next I'm going to break down two fights this weekend. UFC's back. They've had a couple, I'm thinking 3 cards in a row that no one really cared about. It was just kind of putting content out there that you could watch on a Saturday night. Watch some UFC fights. Not saying they weren't good. They just didn't have the name notoriety or the skill level that we were accustomed at the beginning of the pandemic. But they were content and they were fun to watch. That Michelle Waterson, Angelina Hill fight was absolute war. Those two girls went out and fought their asses off. Both fighters, in my opinion, moved up in the rankings or should move up in the rankings. Obviously, Waterson got the split decision win. It was a great fight. I really enjoyed watching it. But this fight, or this week, it's kind of similar. Not the biggest card, not the most stacked card, but the two big fights that have two very big implications going forward. The first one being Niko Price versus Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Going into this fight, obviously for Niko Price, this is the biggest fight of his career. This is the biggest notoriety he's faced, and this is a big step. This is a big step for him if he were to win this fight. On Cowboy side of this, he's got to prove he can still do it against the top guy. Niko Price is a young, talented lion that is coming for this division to try to make an impact in this division. And Cowboy, let's be honest, is at the tail end of his career. He's been through so many wars, so many battles, and he's on a little bit of a skid. But do not count Cowboy out. Cowboy always seems to step up when everyone starts counting him out. He goes on runs. He's a very streaky fighter, and I just think it's going to be a great fight, but there's big implications. Unfortunately, even though I'm a huge Cowboy fan, I think Niko Price is going to be able to do this. I think the wars have caught up to Cowboy Cerrone. He's not as quick as he was. His technique is still there, but his timing, which is very important in fighting, is just not what it used to be. He was one of them. He was one of those fighters that had once he got going, his timing was almost perfect. He's a notable slow starter. I don't think that changes here. I think Niko Price comes out, really establishes himself early, really takes up the pace right off the bat and goes for a quick finish, ends up winning. I don't think he finishes Cowboy, but I think he ends up taking the first 2 rounds, Cowboy taking the third, and Niko Price takes the win. Unfortunately, I think we're watching the end of a career for Donald Cowboy Cerrone. And the sad thing is, especially in UFC, especially in MMA, especially in boxing, combat sports in general, when you watch the end of a fighter, it is a sad sight to see. We saw it with Muhammad Ali. We saw it with fighters in the UFC like Chuck Liddell, BJ Penn, Randy Couture, and Cowboy Cerrone's no different. No matter how great of a fighter you are, you usually end your career on a sour note. And it comes to an end pretty quick. So I think that's what we're seeing here. Cowboy's a fantastic fighter, an obvious Hall of Famer, but Nico Price is coming, and he's coming hard, and he's going to make a statement in this fight and end up moving up the rankings. Big win for him. Like I said, biggest fight of his career, biggest name of his career. Cowboy's an absolute legend, but every legend falls in MMA. It always happens. All right, the next fight is actually a fight that I have no idea who in the matchmaking world thought this was a good fight to put together. I do not understand it. Kobe Covington versus Tyron Woodley, right? Kobe Covington is coming off a title fight loss a long time ago, about a year now, against Kamaru Usman, right? Where he took 2 of 5 rounds from Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman ended up winning the fight, finishing the fight. Kamaru Usman, did some damage, but Covington was in that fight and made it competitive, and probably the most competitive fight Kamaru Usman's had since he's won that title. And then Tyron Woodley on the other side of this has lost 15 straight rounds. 15. He just got his ass whooped by Gilbert Burns. Are we going to talk about the fact that he got manhandled by Kamaru Usman? He has looked absolutely horrendous his last 3 fights. Horrendous. And you're like, oh yeah, let's put him up against Kobe Covington because they hate each other. I'm all for it. I love grudge matches, but this is going to be an ass whooping. Kobe Covington is going to manhandle Woodley. He's one of the worst stylistic matchups for Tyron Woodley in the division because he has a gas tank that never ends. He's got decent boxing skills. You saw that with Robbie Lawler, that he can stand and bang. You saw it with Kamaru Usman. He hit him pretty good. He has a decent stand-up game. His takedowns are second to none, but his gas tank just goes and goes and goes and goes. What is Tyron Woodley's biggest problem? His gas tank. He does not have one. He fights off his back foot the whole time. He waits and waits and waits, and it explodes. And when it doesn't work, he loses the round. And he's going to lose every single round again on Saturday. This is going to be a blowout. This should not even be talked about. This fight should not have been made. Tyron Woodley should have been given an up-and-comer just like Cowboy Cerrone. He should have been given an up-and-comer to reestablish himself or push him out of the UFC, push him out of the division, because this does nothing. I can't believe – I know why Kobe Covington took the fight. I understand that he can't stand Tyron Woodley, and Tyron Woodley cannot stand him. But this is a lose-lose battle for Kobe Covington. He goes out – let's just say he goes out there and manhandles him for 5 rounds, kicks the shit out of him, gets a couple 10-8s in there. Everyone's going to say, well, it's Tyron Woodley on the backside of his career. It's an aging Tyron Woodley. It's an old Tyron Woodley. If Tyron Woodley hits him with a right hand, which he's got a puncher's chance because he hits very hard still, the last thing to go for a fighter is your punch. He hits very hard. Let's say Covington moves the wrong way one time, telegraphs a takedown, gets just lit up with a right hand. This knocks Kobe Covington down the ladder for a while. A win does nothing for Kobe Covington. I think it was a stupid fight to take, but I think it's going to be an absolute ass-kicking, and guess what? You're going to get some phenomenal trash talk from Kobe Covington because that is what he does best besides fighting. He is an absolute great fighter. He's a fantastic fighter. People need to start respecting him. I get it. You don't like the gimmick, but respect the guy. He's going to kick the shit out of Tyron Woodley. He's going to get right back in the title picture. And because, he did slay a former welterweight champion, or the previous welterweight champion. So it's gonna be an absolute ass kicking. And I guess, what do you give him? Masvidal after? Guess what? It's gonna look a lot like Masvidal versus Kamaru Usman, where literally Covington's just gonna take him down relentlessly because Masvidal does not have the gas tank, does not have the takedown defense to stop relentless takedowns. And that's what Covington gives you, just like Kamaru Usman. So that's my episode for this week. It's a little late tonight, but I'll get it up Saturday morning. I want you guys to enjoy the rest of your weekend. Again, follow along on my football picks. Watch the fights this weekend. It's a great card leading up to UFC 253. That's what we have to look forward to next week. Next week will be a big UFC breakdown, and I'm going to break down the whole main card along with some football picks, and we will get more into NBA. I thank you guys for listening. Thank you for tuning in every week. Thank you for getting me the views and just going along with me on this journey. I appreciate it. You guys have a great weekend. Enjoy the rest of it.